As for our live Campaign 2018 call-in during Washington Journal at 7 a.m. Eastern on C-SPAN. In the South Dakota governor's race, Republican Congresswoman Kristi Noem faced two challengers for a debate, Democrat Billie Sutton and Libertarian Kurt Evans. The current governor of South Dakota is term limited. This is just under an hour.
Welcome to Election 2018. Today we focus on the candidates running for the office of South Dakota Governor. This broadcast is not a debate, it is a forum so that we can provide a conversation on the issues. Each candidate will have the opportunity to address all of the issues brought up tonight. There is a 1-minute opening and closing statement. Now let's meet our guests. Libertarian candidate Kurt Evans, welcome. Republican candidate, Congresswoman Kristi Noem, welcome.
Everybody. Thank you.
Democrat candidate, South Dakota State Senator Billie Sutton, welcome. We will begin with our opening statements. Names were drawn to determine the order. Going first is Congresswoman Kristi Noem. You may begin.
Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight. When my dad was killed in an accident on our family farm, we had land, machinery, and cattle, but we didn't have money in the bank to pay death taxes. So we had to get innovative. We started a hunting lodge to bring in extra revenue. We cut costs. We found efficiencies. These are all lessons that I will bring into the governor's office. And I've got some big ideas for this state. Ways we can work on education and workforce, move people off of assistance and into higher paying jobs, address affordable housing and affordable health care, go after our mental health care crisis, and make sure we're waging a war on addiction. We don't have to grow the size of state government to do these things. We don't have to raise taxes to do it. All we need is genuine accountability, experience, and leadership. So I look forward to the discussion tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, you too have 1 minute to share your thoughts with South Dakota. Go ahead.
Thanks. Again, my name is Kurt Evans. I grew up in Washington Springs. I'm the elder son of Kyle Evans, who was a country musician that the older folks still remember. He was named the official troubadour of South Dakota's centennial celebration in 1989, and he was inducted into the State Hall of Fame later that year. I went to college at South Dakota State University. I studied mathematics and science education, got a bachelor's degree there, became a high school teacher and a basketball coach. In 1996, I ran for the U.S. House of Representatives as an independent. That was the race in which John Thune won, was first elected to the U.S. House. In 2002, I joined the Libertarian Party and was their nominee for the United States Senate. In 2014, I ran for South Dakota State Auditor, also as a Libertarian, and now I'm the Libertarian candidate for governor. So, nice to meet you.
All right. Thank you very much. Senator Sutton, it's your turn. Go ahead.
Well, I'm Billie Sutton, and I never saw myself in politics. You know, I grew up on our family ranch, fell in love with rodeo at a young age, and rodeoed professionally, and really had my life planned out. I knew how I was going to go. I was going to make it to National Finals Rodeo and be a world champion saddle bronc rider. October 4th of 2007, a horse flipped over on me in the chute, shattered 2 vertebrae, and had spinal cord damage. Was instantly paralyzed from the waist down. It was a pretty stark moment in my life, but the people that invested in me, my friends and family and my wife Kelsey, really awakened in me a service over self mentality, and I knew I wanted to give back for all that I'd been given. So I ran for the legislature. I've served in the Senate the last 8 years, and it's just been an incredible journey. I think South Dakotans want somebody that's going to bring people together. That's what I've done during my time in the legislature. That's what I'm going to do as governor. Bring people together around shared values like honesty, integrity, and hard work, values that we all share as South Dakotans. It's great to be here tonight.
All right, thank you. We'll begin with our questions. Senator Sutton, you'll go first, followed by Mr. Evans. This first one is about your priorities. What are your legislative and policy priorities as leader of the administration if you should become elected? Senator Sutton.
Yeah, you know, we kicked off this campaign with a listening tour, where we went around the state and listened to what South Dakotans wanted. I think that's really important because too often politicians do a lot of talking and not enough listening. And what we heard is that people want an honest, open, and transparent government. And that's going to be my #1 priority as governor. I've brought legislation to make that happen by working to open up state government emails, by making sure that we have longer record retention, also making sure that politicians can't walk away with campaign cash for personal use. I've worked on campaign finance reform, and those are all things that are really important to South Dakotans. And so right out of the gate, I'm going to work on making sure that we have an open, honest, and transparent government. Then number two, we need to get after it on workforce development. You know, we have a workforce shortage in this state, and I think we need to address it more aggressively and go at it from the high school level by making sure that we're offering opportunities for career and technical education so that we can build a pipeline for our tech schools and address workforce needs right here in South Dakota. Because one thing we heard from a lot of folks is that our kids are leaving South Dakota, and we want to keep them here. We have the hardest working kids in the country, and we got to keep them right here and give them opportunities to succeed right here. And that's what I'm going to focus on as governor.
So, Mr. Evans, same question. If you are elected governor, what will be your legislative and policy priorities?
The Libertarian Party, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Libertarian Party, the essence of what the party stands for is more individual freedom and less government. And we believe that those two things almost always go hand in hand. And one of the main issues that I've talked about, I was nominated to become the Libertarian Party candidate for governor at the state convention in Fort Pierre on June 9th. There were two of us who ran for governor, and we had a good debate there. And one of the issues that came up between us was the issue of civil asset forfeiture, And that's basically, there are certain circumstances under which law enforcement can confiscate property without due process. Usually it's something drug related, like if you're in a car where drugs are found, they can take your money. There are other situations, it happens sometimes when people are driving through other states, but if you're traveling with a large amount of money and the officer thinks it looks suspicious, they can confiscate the money. And then you have to actually go to court and fight, find an attorney to get your own property back. And it's really created a lot of horror stories around the country. I mean, you could write a book of all the terrible things that have happened to innocent people who just happen to be carrying a large amount of money. One thing I would really like to move the legislature on is to make sure that South Dakota isn't one of those states where people could be driving through. And I'm not condoning illegal activity, but I think that there should be due process before any property is confiscated.
Thank you. Congresswoman Noem, same question, your legislative and policy priorities.
So I've put out 14 different policy proposals in this campaign, but the two I hear the most often about is education and workforce. We have hundreds of empty jobs across the state of South Dakota, and it's not that people aren't working. We have, in most of our families, both parents working. In fact, we have the highest rate of working moms in the nation here in South Dakota, and it's often because they don't make enough money individually that it takes two to pay the bills to keep a household going. But we have hundreds of empty jobs that pay $25, $30 an hour, and people are underemployed. So coordinating with our technical schools and higher education universities to make sure that people have the skills to fill those positions is incredibly important. We need to make sure that we go after apprenticeship programs. We allow people to get trained on the job while they're still earning a wage to take care of their families, partner with technical schools to do the administrative side of that, and then the state of South Dakota needs to license them. Today, we don't really do that aggressively, and if we do that, we can fill those jobs, help those families get a new career, and pay their bills better. But we do have some challenges in education, too. We have some school districts in this state that don't have enough revenue. They are struggling, and I think that we need to look at that and make sure that we are getting the resources where they need to be. But remember that education is about kids. And we've got a third of our kids that come out of our K-12 system that have to take remedial courses before they're prepared for a higher education. So focus on results for them, preparing them for the future, and making sure that when they go on to technical school and higher education, that we have a tuition they can afford that's competitive in our region, and that we're allowing them the opportunity to be successful going forward.
All right. Are we good moving on to health care? Mr. Evans, you'll go first with this one. If elected governor, what policies or initiatives would you advocate regarding access to health care and health insurance in our state?
Yeah, I'm a really hardline libertarian on this, and there's probably a very small portion of the population that sees this my way, but I don't think the government should have ever gotten involved in health care, and I don't think anything good has come from it. I think a lot of the skyrocketing costs have actually been caused by the government's involvement. Because you've got the government, paying half the bills and stifling innovation, and micromanaging even where it's not paying the bills. And I guess I would support anything we could do to return healthcare to the private sector. I thought that the judgment of the state legislature when they decided not to get involved in the I'm fumbling for the words. The federal program, we decided not to participate in a federal program to be involved in Obamacare. And I thought it was a good decision, mainly based on the fact that you don't know how those federal programs might change. And once the state becomes dependent on them, you can't go back on that once you've made the decision. So I still feel that way too. Like, it's best if we can stay as independent as possible in the way we handle our health care. We're less vulnerable to changes in policy at the federal level.
All right, thank you. Congresswoman Noem, same question. What policies or initiatives would you advocate regarding access to health care and health insurance?
So a lot of people look at South Dakota and they see some of the aspects of our state and think it's detrimental to us, that we're small, we don't have many people. I think those are huge opportunities for us. We can be nimble because we don't have a lot of people. We can be a pilot project for the country on new ways to deliver health insurance, new ways to offer policies that cover families that truly do need it. I know this is a big difference between me and Billie. Billie has advocated for expanding Obamacare in the state of South Dakota. That is not something I'm in favor of. I'm a big believer in making sure that we're getting people off of government health care and into competitive policies that really cover their needs for their families. One of the things I've talked about with Medicaid is that I believe that the Indian Health Services needs to pay their bills for the tribal care that happens in South Dakota. And if we participate as a state in care coordination agreements with them and help our tribes have some ownership in their health care facilities, it'll free up to 40% more Medicaid dollars that we can use for families that really do need it. And this is really where my experience comes to the table. You know, I've worked on this for years, and I understand how federal dollars impact our states, the flexibility that we can have as South Dakotans to run these programs. I was visiting with the Vice President about this today on the phone, about the fact that we have some huge opportunities here in South Dakota to get people covered and to make sure we're delivering better tribal health care at the same time, while also being much more competitive. Iowa is doing some incredible things, partnering with Farm Bureau to offer policies at about 50% the cost to families. And they don't cover everything, but it's an option that we should be looking at here in South Dakota and being much more innovative. And that's my concern in this governor's race is my ideas are very different than my opponents. I know that Billie has talked about his support for the policies of Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders wants socialized medicine. That's not something that I support, and it's not something that I'm going to pursue here in South Dakota as well.
Senator Sutton, your turn to answer. When we're talking about providing access to health care and health insurance, what policies would you advocate?
First of all, I'm not sure how Bernie Sanders came up in this conversation, but, we need to focus on doing what's right for South Dakotans. We've turned away $2 billion. If those were transportation dollars, we'd have driven up there and gotten them ourselves. The people that we're talking about here in South Dakota are working South Dakotans. They are folks that just cannot simply afford health insurance. And the problem is that they're getting their care today. It's just at the wrong place, the wrong time, and the wrong cost. And that's in the emergency room. Governor Daugaard was supporting the acceptance of these dollars. He was working with the legislature to find common ground. It's a perfect example where we need to find common ground. Not take this Washington politician rhetoric and seek to divide us, but to actually bring us together to solve South Dakota's problems. That needs to be our focus. This is a conversation about access to healthcare coverage so that we can have a healthy workforce that fills our needs as, for our businesses and so that people are healthy. That needs to be the focus. And those are the things I'm going to focus on. More access to care so we have a healthier population.
Any follow-up?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer in working together to solve these problems. In fact, I've worked in a very bipartisan manner on these issues when I was in the state legislature. I've been working with Republicans and Democrats on these types of reforms since I've been working for South Dakota. And so this is something that I'm passionate about. I think we can be much more nimble and get people health care coverage in South Dakota that really meets their families' needs. But we don't have to do it by increasing the government's role in health care. That's where we've seen costs go up. In fact, when Obamacare was put into place, we saw dozens of taxes get signed into law that drove up costs for health care. We really do need to offer some more opportunities for people to have more flexibility and freedom, drive down those costs. And I'm just not in favor of expanding government-run health care.
Any thoughts before we move on, Senator?
I mean, I think that part of the frustration in this conversation is that the Congresswoman Noem has not offered any solutions. Well, she's been in Washington, D.C. She should be offering solutions, not just the rhetoric that says we don't need to do anything, because we've had problems in healthcare for a long time. If she had it her way, we wouldn't have coverage for pre-existing conditions. We wouldn't have folks being covered up to age 26 under their parents' plan. There have been no solutions offered. We need to live in the here and now and focus on what we can do to build a stronger South Dakota where we can all succeed. And that's going to be my focus as governor.
Any final thoughts?
Yeah, Stephanie, that's just simply not the truth. I am sponsored over a dozen different bills that have to do with health care reform and worked extensively. I have a very comprehensive bill on Indian health service reform, ways that we can repeal taxes in health care. I'm a sponsor of the health insurance tax repeal, the medical device tax repeal. There's taxes on prescription drugs, over-the-counter drugs, and what we can do to repeal those taxes and drive down those costs and give people more opportunities. That's all the work that I've been sponsoring on, and my record backs it up. And that clearly is what the case is in this race, is that I'm very proud of my record. I've worked very hard for the state of South Dakota. And I know that a lot of times when it comes to Billie's record and his vote for expanding Obamacare in the state, expanding and supporting amnesty, going after and being soft on crime, that's a record he doesn't want to talk about. But I'm proud of my record working for South Dakota.
Before we move on, Senator, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think passing one bill during her time in Congress and us paying her $1.4 million to do it is not a very good record, frankly, and that's the record that she has.
I would disagree wholeheartedly with that, and that is simply not the truth.
We're going to move on. We're going to talk about mental health challenges in our state. Congresswoman Noem, you will get to start with this next one. Suicide deaths in South Dakota are increasing, specifically among younger people. And according to the CDC, the number of suicide deaths here in South Dakota has increased over the past 10 years by 44%. The national average of an increase is 25%. What will you do to follow up on the work of the Mental Health Task Force, and what other actions could you take as governor?
Absolutely. This is one of the biggest challenges our state faces. And in my public safety platform, I addressed mental health issues because a lot of times in South Dakota, when people struggle with mental health, they often don't get diagnosed or don't get treatment. It might escalate into an addictive situation, and then they often end up in our criminal justice system. In fact, in our criminal justice system, 80 to 90% of the people there are dealing with some kind of an addiction, and many of them suffer from a mental health situation that needs treatment, needs care, and needs counseling. So in a couple parts of our state, we have pretty good services, but we need services throughout the entire state. I've long supported and advocated for telepsychiatry to make sure our most remote parts of the state have an opportunity to receive care and counseling. Many of our small towns are putting together crisis teams to deal with the immediate 24 to 48 hours that someone needs to intervene in a suicide situation. But also the challenges we have is that after they get past that situation, where do they go? We just simply don't have enough counseling and treatment centers in the state of South Dakota. And so I've long supported a mental health facility, West River. We need more access to counselors and treatment, as well as an opportunity for families to get counseling getting through this situation. And then alternative types of opportunities for those that get caught up into our criminal justice system, that we have a drug court that works well. If we can expand on that, a mental health court that is working as well, if we can expand on that and make them work better, it'll be a much better situation for those families, but also for those law enforcement officers. I think one of the biggest challenges that families in South Dakota face in mental health is not having enough access, not having enough treatment and counseling services. And it's one of the biggest challenges that our Native American tribes suffer with as well. I think we all know clearly the challenge and epidemic that we've seen on our tribes over the years.
So, Senator Sutton, we're talking about the increase in suicide rates that we're seeing. What would you do in terms of the work the Mental Health Task Force has done. Would you follow up on that, and are there other actions you could take?
Yeah, I think absolutely. That's one of the things I'm looking forward to seeing, some of the recommendations that they come up with, but then picking up on those and putting together a work group of folks on the ground, the true professionals, because we need their input to solve these problems. We need the input from everyday South Dakotans to solve these problems, just like I've done on my campaign of listening to the people and going around and hearing what the will of the voters want. Mental health is one of those top issues that we need to focus on. Access to services, a continuum of care that is lacking right now. And those are the things that I want to focus on to make sure that we're getting input from the folks that know best what we need to be doing. And I have the leadership skills to do that by working with the legislature to find common ground to get things done for South Dakota.
Mr. Evans, when we're talking about the Mental Health Task Force, what work would you do to follow up on what they've done so far, and what more could you do?
Yeah, I'm going to take maybe a little bit of a circuitous route to answering the question, but trust me, I'm not as far off topic as you might think. I'm a traditional Bible-believing Christian, and that includes the things Jesus said, that God created humans male and female from the beginning of creation. He said that in Mark 10. He was clearly referring to the first chapter of Genesis. And I'm one of those people, a young earth creationist, if you've ever heard of it, who actually believes that God created the universe about 4000 BC. And most of the geological phenomena that they attribute to vast periods of time were actually caused during Noah's flood. The point I'm trying to get to is right now we have a public education system that's basically indoctrinated 2 full generations of Americans into believing that the Bible isn't true, the earth is billions of years old, and we're basically conglomerations of molecules that came together by chance somewhere in the vast recesses of deep time. And I think when you teach people that they're just a cosmic accident, I think that contributes to a lot of the mental health care problems as well as the drug abuse issues. It's like if I'm just a bunch of dust and gas that floated around the universe and bumped into each other and one day decided to become organic, why shouldn't I abuse drugs? And why is my life worth preserving? And I think most of the solutions to the mental health care problems would be better found by a return to the Christian roots that the nation was founded on. I'm really skeptical of secular mental health care in general. I think there's a lot of it that's borderline quackery. I think that it's sometimes the effects are neutral. Sometimes it's nice just to have somebody to talk to, but sometimes the things that we call treatment are actually counterproductive. So, in general, libertarians don't want the government involved in health care. Mental health care is also extremely expensive. If it was worth what it costs, people would be paying for it themselves, but they almost never do. I mean, they do sometimes. But I'm not a fan of taking a bunch of money from the taxpayers and using it in ways that they wouldn't use it to help themselves. So I guess the short answer is, I have 15 seconds left to wrap this up. I'm skeptical of mental health care in general. Libertarians are skeptical of government in general, so I definitely don't want the government taking money from taxpayers and spending it on mental health care.
Thank you. We're going to talk about agriculture. Senator Sutton, you'll go first. The average age of today's farmer or rancher is 57 years old. With an aging ag population, rising land and production costs, and a volatile market, give a brief summary of what you feel is the state of the ag industry in South Dakota and what policy positions and or initiatives you would push.
Yeah. Ag is our number one industry. I grew up on our family ranch and helped Dad out and Mom throughout all my young years. And we have to support our producers. We have to work for them and fight for them because there is a lot of uncertainty out there, whether that is bad weather or markets that are volatile. We have a lot of challenges facing agriculture, but I'm very hopeful for the future of agriculture. A renewed focus on precision ag is something that I supported during my time in the legislature. Research, animal diagnostic lab. That's another thing that I've supported during my time. But you're right when you mention that we have an ever-aging population. And so one of the pieces of my plan that I put out for agriculture is to do a better job of supporting our young producers at the higher education level, to work to get the cost of inputs down for South Dakotan farmers and ranchers, And I think that's things that we need to focus on by offering more education opportunities. You know, as I discussed with tech school opportunities, there's a lot of opportunities for value-added ag. And I think those are things that we need to be focusing on. And so we do have challenges, though, with how the tariffs have affected our producers. That's a huge issue because we're going to have banner crops, and they're not going to be paid for it because of politics. And that's disheartening to me. And I just hope that we can get it figured out here.
Mr. Evans, same question. If you could give a brief summary on what you feel is the state of the ag industry here in South Dakota, and what policies or initiatives are you going to push if you become governor to help with the ag industry?
Yeah, I don't have any specific policies that I've proposed regarding agriculture. I think to some extent the aging population the increasing average age of a farmer is caused by the fact that we don't need as many young people to stay on the farm because people are farming so much more land than they used to. I mean, I can see this even in the farms that my dad and his cousins grew up on. They're adjacent to each other. And, you know, where you might have had 5 or 6 people farming land before, you could have 2 people farming it now. And so if there just aren't as many young people coming into farming because each person is farming more land, and I guess I don't have too much of an answer on this question. Libertarians think the government should stay out of this stuff, should have never gotten involved in agriculture in the first place, so I don't have any policy proposals to offer.
All right, Congresswoman Noem, we're talking about our aging ag industry, what the state of ag is here at home, and any policies or initiatives you would push.
Sure, absolutely. I'm a lifelong farmer and rancher. So from the time I was a little girl, that's all I wanted to do when I grew up, and recognize that it's getting harder and harder to transition to the younger generation because of the highly leveraged industry that it is, the risks that farmers take each and every day, the money they have to borrow, put it in the dirt and hope that there's a crop to go harvest later. So we need to have safety nets, and I've worked extensively to bring safety nets, was championed and wrote 5 different bills that ended up in the last farm bill that gave us a safety net, permanent livestock disaster programs, crop insurance, to make sure that we had a safety net for those who grow this world's food. And that's incredibly important. Right now, agriculture is struggling. We are in the middle of a trade war. I've encouraged this administration over and over again to wrap that up as quickly as possible. We had 4 years of decreased prices to begin with, and then this trade war hit, and it's been pretty devastating for our farmers. I'm grateful that USDA has listened and given us some opportunities for payments to help us through this situation, but we need more markets and the ability to do that. One thing I've advocated for at the federal level was E15. I'm a big believer in ethanol and a part of its future. So the fact that the President recently signed an executive order saying that he's going to allow us to sell E15 year-round is a huge historic win for South Dakota agriculture. Every farmer out there growing row crops is going to see increased prices because of that policy. And so I was very grateful to see that. In South Dakota, as governor, what I want to do is move the state fleet to E30. I think we should lead by example, that our state vehicles should be running on E30, and then I want to challenge other governors to follow through and support the industry like we are, and make sure we drive that policy from South Dakota here and be leaders supporting our own renewable fuel that we grow right here at home that brings up prices for our farmers. Our farmers don't want aid, they want trade. They want new markets. And so ethanol is another market right here domestically that we really can build in to help us be successful and help those young farmers have an opportunity to get a price and to cash flow going forward. The precision ag is incredibly important for our state. That investment will help us recruit other ag-oriented businesses. And so I'm thrilled at the opportunities. We need to find ways for producers to get another source of revenue off of their operations. We are uniquely situated to recruit biotech companies. Biotech companies want to come to South Dakota with our friendly business environment. We're a low-tax state, low-regulatory state. We're huge in agriculture, and they want to partner and help our producers come up with another revenue stream that will diversify their operations and help them be successful long into the future.
All right. Any final thoughts before we move on, Senator?
I'll weigh in again because what Congresswoman Noem brought up that I think needs to be addressed is she talked about her work on the farm bill. But the reality is we don't have a farm bill right now. She had promised that we would have one back in May publicly, and we still don't have a farm bill. And I think that's very disappointing. It shows that there's been a lot of talk from Congresswoman Noem, but not enough action. And I don't think we need Washington's problems here in South Dakota. We need South Dakota solutions. And if Congresswoman Noem isn't going to work to address the Farm Bill and address these tariff issues that we have, then I'm willing to put together a group of bipartisan governors to go to Washington and fight for agriculture. I think we need leadership that's going to take this head on, and Congresswoman Noem hasn't done that.
Congresswoman?
Sure. Let me tell you why the Farm Bill's not done. Because the Democrats in the Senate right now are trying to take money out of commodity programs. Debbie Stabenow from Michigan is running for re-election. She wants to take more money out of commodity programs that are the safety nets for our farmers here in South Dakota and put them into urban gardens and into farmers markets. That helps her very much in this election to show that she's advocating for her district. Well, we're not going to sign a bad farm bill. We're going to fight and make sure that we have a farm bill that keeps the revenue that's supposed to stay in commodity programs for our farmers right here in South Dakota. Now, the good thing is that the last farm bill that we did, we made the programs permanent. So every farmer still has the programs operating today like they always have been, that when we get back after this election and Debbie's done playing politics, we'll get this farm bill done and we'll have kept the revenue that South Dakota farmers deserve. Sometimes you have to fight and make sure that you're protecting your state, and that's what I've done consistently. There was a national debate and fight with my own leadership over the last farm bill to make sure we got livestock disaster programs in place, that we got provisions to fight the pine beetles in the Black Hills, and we won to make sure that we had crop insurance. So those provisions have been incredibly important, and that last farm bill with those permanent programs is keeping us stable today until we get another farm bill that works here in South Dakota.
We're going to move to workforce. Mr. Evans, you'll take this one first. During the campaign, all of you have talked about workforce development here at home. What is the role of state government regarding the issue, and what would you specifically prioritize if you become governor?
Well, here we go again. I guess anytime you're using the government to try to address a problem, you have to first create a government program, and every time you create a government program, there are overhead expenses in that program. The best way to develop the workforce would just be to let people keep their own money and use that money in an attempt to, you earn wealth. Ideally, in a free market economy, you're going to acquire wealth by serving other people, by giving them goods and services that they want. And I think that anytime the government starts meddling in that system and taking money and moving it from one place to another by force, the whole society gets poorer. And a lot of times I think when libertarians say, well, the government shouldn't be paying for your health care or the government shouldn't be paying for your college and things like that, people just see that as a loss, but they don't understand that the economy, the private sector economy, would be that much stronger. If that money had just been left in the economy to begin with, people would be able to pay for their own health care. The cost of health care wouldn't be driven up by government paying more than it's worth. Okay, I'm drifting off the topic of workforce. I think you get the point I'm trying to make is that anytime you create a government program to address any of these issues, including workforce, the costs end up outweighing the benefits. So libertarians would be opposed in general to anything like that.
Thank you. Congresswoman Noem, we're talking about the role that state government would play. What do you see that role in terms of workforce development?
I think a lot of times state government can be more flexible and can make sure that they're not hindering the process. Sometimes in some of the areas in the state of South Dakota, it's hard to get licensed to fill the jobs that we need filled. So if we can be more nimble, work with apprenticeship programs in our technical schools to get people trained and skilled quicker into those positions, that's incredibly helpful for filling all those empty jobs that we have in the state. And I want to go after and recruit the next big industry for South Dakota. We have a strong state when we can diversify our economy and make sure that all parts of it are thriving. And so not only growing the small businesses on Main Street and helping them be successful and expand and reinvest in their people with higher wages, but also going out and recruiting that next big industry to the state of South Dakota. But I'll tell you what, it'll be a challenge. It'll be a challenge recruiting businesses if we raise taxes. People have asked me about this consistently in this race, why I've signed a taxpayer protection pledge, why I've pledged to you that I'm not going to raise your taxes, and it's for a couple of reasons. Number one, we've had two of the largest tax increases in our state's history in recent years. Now is not the time to be raising people's taxes. Farmers and ranchers that are struggling right now, they can't take more money out of their pockets and turn it over to the government. That's why I'm not in favor of it. It's different than Billie Sutton, who has not signed a taxpayer protection pledge, has not said that he won't raise your taxes. In fact, fact, in his own words, has advocated for a personal income tax here in South Dakota and has utilized his own personal money to do research to find out if it would be popular to pursue, and has put it in the platform of the Democratic Party, of which he's the leader. So it's a clear difference between he and I and how we view economics, how we view our state and our ability to grow and recruit businesses and to help them to expand. And I think it's incredibly important that we understand what makes us special here in South Dakota, and what will help us fill our workforce needs and help raise wages is making sure that we're a business-friendly state going forward.
Senator Sutton, do you want to respond before we go to the question?
I do. Congresswoman Noem, just because you keep saying something doesn't make it true. I have opposed the state income tax and will continue to do so. So your Washington style of attacks just are not what South Dakota needs today. And that's the reality. As far as workforce development goes, I think we have a lot of opportunities. You know, I work as an investment executive, and I understand the importance of smart investments and good investments that strengthen Main Street, that strengthen families, and that strengthen our businesses here in South Dakota. That's why I'm such an advocate for what my hometown of Burke did. They went out and got a grant from the Governor's Future Fund. They bought 4 mobile units, and then they partnered with 3 other schools. So Gregory, Colomb, Burke, and South Central all have a mobile unit where they offer a career and technical education course. Every kid, grade 9 through 12, gets the chance to take one of those courses, whether it's manufacturing, welding, engineering, biomedical. These kids are getting opportunities that they would have never had. Those are the types of things we should be promoting as South Dakotans. Those are the things that state government can partner with our school districts, that we can build public-private partnerships with private entities, like we did with the Build Dakota Scholarship, where we're offering full-ride scholarships for kids to go to tech schools. That's because we've worked to find common ground, and we have worked together to solve problems. And that's what I'm going to focus on.
Congresswoman Noem, do you want to?
Sure. A couple of points. Those aren't my words saying that you support an income tax. It's your words. You've used your words to say that you support it. You've spent your personal money researching it. You offered it as a proposal for a revenue source for the Blue Ribbon Task Force. Everybody at that task force remembers you offering it as a proposal. And then also, you're the leader of the Democratic Party in South Dakota, and this is the year as you run for governor that it's in your party's platform. So it's not just my word. What concerns me is that once you found out it wasn't popular, that you decided now you're against it when previously you were for it. And that's what's concerning, is that I believe the people of South Dakota need someone who's consistent, whose record and background reflects what they're saying in their campaign, and that they just have the truth. When we talk about workforce needs, one of the things I've talked about extensively is putting technical skills and classes back in our middle schools and in our high schools. I think we're paying the price today for pulling a lot of those skills out of our middle schools and high schools over the years. And that if we can allow kids the opportunity to experience a little bit of nursing, robotics, construction, welding in our schools, it'll give them the knowledge that they might have a gift or a talent for that area and open up their eyes to the technical training and jobs that are available right here at home.
Senator Sutton.
I mean, again, I do not support a state income tax. The AP fact-checked your claims on this and said you were not telling the truth. And so you know that you're not telling the truth on this issue. And you can keep saying it, but it just doesn't make it true.
And had all the facts in the story.
They did have the facts. And if you want to talk about taxes, though, during your time in the legislature, you voted to raise taxes and fees 57 times. You were in the lead person on one of the biggest tax increases in state history on ag property, $135 million and a 60% increase. So I don't think you have any wiggle room here.
Can I talk about that,
issue.
Stephanie?
About 15 seconds.
Because the fact that Billy makes that point tells me that he doesn't really understand how the state budget works. Because that bill that I carried in the legislature was done to protect farmers, to make sure that they weren't going to be taxed off their land. What that bill did is it moved assessments from sales to productivity, which every single ag organization in the state supported, because they recognized that they weren't going to be able to afford their property taxes. I worked hard with our ag organizations to protect farmers and ranchers, and the fact that he's comparing what property taxes are paid today versus what they were back then just shows that the economy did grow, and that the economics of how that naturally happens is not something that you understand. So I'm concerned that that bill that you're twisting to make it look like it's something that it was completely the opposite. If we had never done that legislation, farmers farmers and ranchers would pay much higher taxes today and would not be able to afford their land and pass it on to the next generation.
Senator, final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, only a Washington politician can say, I'm going to keep your taxes low while raising your taxes. I know the budget very well. I've served on appropriations 6 of my 8 years, and I've worked with Governor Daugaard to balance the state's budget every year. Unlike in Washington, D.C., where we have the highest deficit we've ever seen in this country's history.
And I support a balanced budget amendment, which you do not. You voted against in the legislature.
You have not done anything to address the
Yes,
deficit.
I have.
We're going to move on to...
Yes, I have. I voted for $6 trillion worth of spending cuts, and I support a balanced budget amendment, which you voted against in the state legislature.
We're going to talk about our younger generation. Congresswoman Noem, you'll start with this one. South Dakota is one of only 6 state governments that do not provide funding or oversight for preschool education. What do you see as the state role for preschool, and would you support any policy that changes that?
Yeah, we have, again, some challenges in South Dakota because we do have the highest rate of working moms in the nation. So when both parents are working and they're outside their home, they have challenges with childcare, but they also want their child to have an opportunity to get education as well. So I think the state can be flexible with allowing some opportunities to partner with businesses and allow parents opportunities, not just for childcare, but also for folks to invest in them and prepare them for the future. I'm not in favor of mandates, and I think that we need to make sure that we're giving opportunities to parents, but not mandating anything to them, but also focusing on the challenges that they really do have in many of our smaller towns across the state of South Dakota and getting those kinds of options available for them.
Thank you. Senator Sutton, same thing. We're talking about funding preschool. What do you see as the role that the state can play in terms of funding preschool?
Yeah, this is a very important issue because of the return on investment that you see from early childhood education. That's why I've been a leader in working with the legislature to try to bring better access to early childhood education. We're one of only a handful of states that doesn't support early childhood education. And I think that's a black eye on South Dakota. I think we need to be working to give our kids opportunities. I have a 2.5-year-old son, Liam, and we just need to be supporting our kids at an earlier level. And that's what I'm going to focus on. One of the things that we can do is just set up an advisory committee. That will allow us to get some federal dollars that we can start working towards offering early childhood education, that we can focus on just defining the problem, because the legislature hasn't been able to even study the issue. And I think we need to first study it and then go down the road of what we can do and build some public-private partnerships to do that. And I think we have a great opportunity in that area.
Mr. Evans, what do you see the role of state government in terms of funding preschool?
Yeah. Well, this is one area in which I wouldn't say I'm an absolutist. I do believe there is a role for state government in education. If we look at the founders of the country didn't put anything in the Constitution about education. There's no role for the federal government constitutionally. Nothing in the Constitution authorizes the federal government to be involved in education. And at the state level, if you look at, originally it was grades 1 through 8, and we were teaching kids basic literacy and basic mathematics, just so they could function at a basic level in society. And then if you wanted a further education, whether it's in science or theology or medicine or whatever, you're responsible for coming up with that money on your own, or people, if you can find people to give you the money who support what you're doing, great. But I think it's a dangerous thing when the government is taking people's money by force, because then the government becomes the final arbiter of what everyone has to learn and believe and almost be indoctrinated in. I know the question was about pre-K, but it ties in. I think in general, biblically and based on my religion, education is primarily the responsibility of parents, not the government. And I think that the government can assist. I think it's good to have a literate society. I think if you want a functioning democratic republic, you have to have basic literacy and basic mathematics. But I don't think we need to be taking kids away from their parents at even younger ages. I mean, I don't even really like 5-year-olds in kindergarten and to go back to 4 now, and then is it going to be 3? I think most children would be better off in the care of their parents at that age, because even the best teachers are never going to love kids the way their own parents do, and I just think the government is getting too heavy-handed.
Any final thoughts before we move on? I'm going to talk about tribal relations. Senator Sutton, you'll start with this one. What do you feel is the state of tribal relations here in South Dakota? And if elected, what policies or initiatives would you advocate to impact tribal relations and the general quality of life in Indian country?
Yeah, I think it has improved. I think we have a long ways to go. One of the things I like to give Governor Daugaard credit for is putting state-tribal relations as a cabinet-level position. And I think that's very important because then we have someone that's going to be working very closely with our tribes. I've built a lot of good trust with our tribes. I've traveled to every reservation here in South Dakota on this campaign. And we have a lot of opportunities to build trust and to build our relations with them, to work on improving education and healthcare and economic development. I think those are three areas that we can really work together on to help build a better system. One of the things that Ogallala Lakota County is doing is they're building a CTE high school, Career and Technical Education High School, that they're going to fill up with 400 kids on day one. That's an incredible opportunity. We should be working with our other tribes to do the same thing. Maybe we can partner somehow to get it done, or maybe we can build those public-private partnerships between private business where they have some skin in the game as well. And I think we have a lot of opportunities, but we need a governor that our tribes trust and that will continue to build trust with them. And that's what I feel my strong suit is.
Mr. Evans, same question. How would you describe the state of tribal relations here at home? What would you do to impact that tribal relations and the quality of life in Indian country?
Well, I've lived and taught in Indian country, taught school there and lived there, and actually had taught Bible schools as an assistant to the Rosebud Episcopal Mission when I was just 19, like 1989, I think, spent a summer out there. And I really don't have a lot of answers. My general feeling is that a long-term goal, and I never hear anyone even bring this idea up, my dream would be for us to be able to negotiate with the tribes themselves and say, do we really want to keep the reservation system in place forever or just indefinitely? Isn't there a point at which everyone would be better off if we could integrate into one society instead of having these boundaries and these kind of I call it the inner country. It's a play on the inner city, but we have so many social problems on the reservations, and I just think a lot of those problems are perpetuated by the government programs that are in place now. And I don't have specific proposals on this. I know one thing that I learned when I was in Indian country is that the Indians really appreciated what Governor Mickelson did when he proposed the Year of Reconciliation. Even though it's basically just a symbolic thing, I know from talking to the Native Americans themselves that it really meant something to them and made them feel like they were part of the state. And I think you can do a lot just with words in that area. But yeah, it's such a complicated problem. I couldn't even begin to propose how you would go about dismantling the reservation system and integrating Native Americans into our culture. But I think it's a goal that somebody should be thinking about.
Congresswoman Noem, where are we when it comes to tribal relations with South Dakota? What could you do to help that and improve the quality of life in Indian country?
I think we have an incredible opportunity to have new relationships with our tribes, and working with them over the last decade, I've been incredibly impressed by their love for their people and their culture, but also recognizing that they're our most challenged communities in this state. They face high unemployment rates, high issues of suicide epidemic among their young folks on the reservations. They also face challenges with services and healthcare and education and federal buildings that are falling down, and it really has been a big challenge for them going forward. I would love for the state to have a new relationship with our tribes. On healthcare, I would love to partner with our tribes, and I know the Great Plains Tribal Council is looking at care coordination agreements. I would love the state to help facilitate that so they can have ownership over their healthcare. Right now, the federal government delivery of healthcare there is literally killing them. We have terrible situations going on, and if we could facilitate them having some administrative authority in their hospitals and their clinics, and we could actually save the federal government money by doing that and partnering with them on the administrative side to run their own facilities, it's a win-win for the tribe and better health care at the end of the day. That we could be innovative in education investments to help their youth get the technical skills they need, get the education they need to be supportive. SDSU and President Barry Dunn's doing incredible things with the Waconia Initiative that is investing in the education of Native American youth here in South Dakota. I'd love to partner with him and make sure that we're utilizing that to the fullest extent possible. And then also dealing with unemployment. We need economic investment. There are opportunity zones. The federal government has declared these as areas where we have huge opportunities in front of us, that if the state was going after those kinds of opportunities to help our tribes with new relationships, I think we really, for the first time, could see a turnaround that we just haven't seen in decades there.
All right, very good. Last question. It's hard to believe we've come to the end. Mr. Evans, you'll start with this one. What do you think are the characteristics of a good governor, an effective administrator, and someone to unite South Dakotans in a time of partisan politics?
I just think honesty. I think I'm someone who tries very hard not to say anything that isn't literally true. I'm almost uncomfortable talking out loud. I would rather write so I can go back and edit myself and make sure, now, is that really true, or do I need to reword that? You know, I always feel like even when you're trying so hard not to say anything that isn't true, sometimes you slip up and you do. And I think that's the most important characteristic for a governor. I mean, I think I've shown tonight that even where I hold views that the majority of the population doesn't show, I'll be honest about what I think. And I guess I think that is the most important characteristic for a governor.
Congresswoman Noem, same thing. Characteristics of a good governor, someone that can be a good administrator and unite South Dakotans in a time of partisan politics.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's incredibly important that you do have a governor that has experience, that can hit the ground running, that has run businesses, knows the risks that people take investing in their businesses, has experience at the state level to know what to utilize to help people be successful, and then also understand how federal money impacts our state. It's also important to work across the aisle and work with everybody. I think everybody across the state wants to know that their governor cares about them. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that really, truly is the viewpoint that I have over the years, looking at everything as a mom and as a wife and as someone that lives in a small town ranch right south of Watertown, that you know how people feel each and every day because you're right there doing it with them as well. And also integrity and consistency, that what you say is what you follow through on. And that is what I have been proud of most throughout my life, is that what I say and what I support and what I stand by is what my record shows and what my voting record and experience has shown to the people of South Dakota. So consistency, being a person of integrity, and then also making sure that you have experience to hit the ground running and make decisions that are best for our families is incredibly important.
Senator Sutton, same question. We're talking about the characteristics of a good governor, a good administrator, and someone that can unite South Dakota at this time.
That's really why I got into this race, is that I felt like we have been a country divided, a state that's gotten more and more divided, and I've proven that I can bring people together during my time in the legislature and find common ground to solve South Dakota's solutions. Too many times we let career politicians try to divide us, to make us think we have nothing in common, and to start with what we disagree on rather than what we agree on. And I think we need leaders that are going to bring us together around what we agree on and find that common ground and use honesty, integrity, and hard work in doing so.
All right. Now that we've had the opportunity to talk about a lot of issues tonight, I'd like to give each of you the opportunity to provide a closing statement. We did draw names to determine the order. Going first will be Senator Billie Sutton. You have 1 minute, sir. You can begin.
Yeah, you know, when I got into this race, it was because we live in a country divided, a state that has become more and more divided, and we've got to come together. And I think we come together around shared values, like honesty, integrity, and hard work. Those are values that I learned growing up on our family ranch, where you worked hard till the job got done, you never quit, you never gave up. Those are the things that I'm going to fight for. We have more in common than not as South Dakotans. We all believe that if you work hard, you should be able to get ahead, and that our kids and our grandkids should have the same or better opportunities that we had. When agriculture is strong, South Dakota is strong, and that we should have a state government that's as honest and trustworthy as its people. Those are the ideals that I'll fight for as governor. You can count on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Congresswoman Noem, you too can share your thoughts with South Dakota.
Sure. Well, thank you all for tuning in. On November 6th, you'll have the opportunity to elect the next CEO of South Dakota. And it's a big job, but I've got the experience to hit the ground running. I've been a boss, I've been an employee, I've run businesses, I've started them. I've served in the state legislature and leadership, and I understand how federal dollars impact our state. We don't need to raise taxes to do that, like my opponent wants to do. I don't want to expand Obamacare in our state, like my opponent wants to. I am pro-life, and my record reflects that. The next governor will appoint 2 South Dakota Supreme Court justices. Those justices will be charged with upholding our Constitution, our state laws, and it's important that they reflect our values and our South Dakota common sense. So you know me, you can trust me, I'm consistent, and I'd love to have your vote on November 6th. God bless you.
Mr. Evans, you have 1 minute to share your closing remarks.
I think I just want to say that I believe that Billie and Kristi are both good people. And if you watch TV, you're probably thinking, how could you possibly think they're both good people when you see the things that they say about each other? And it seems to me like there are a lot of half-truths going both ways. I don't think anyone is intentionally telling outright lies. I think they mostly believe the things they're saying, but obviously a lot of the things they're saying can't both be telling the truth. I do think they're good people deep down. I think partisan politics brings out the worst in people. I think there are a lot of states that would be extremely happy to have 3 candidates for governor with as much integrity as our choices have. I know that's probably, I'm including myself, so maybe that sounds boastful. I'll just be honest. I think I am the best candidate of the 3, and I'm going to vote for myself, and I hope you will too. I know I'm not likely to win this election. If the Libertarian Party gets 2.5% of the vote, we get to stay on the ballot, and I have a lot of people who put me on this platform who would love to have me get 2.5% of the vote. I know it's hard when the race between the major party candidates is close, but if there's anybody out there who's willing to throw a vote my way, I would really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. That is all the time we have. I'd like to thank tonight's guests for being with me. Libertarian candidate Kurt Evans, Republican candidate Congresswoman Kristi Noem, and Democrat candidate South Dakota State Senator Billie Sutton. If you missed part of tonight's discussion, tune in to SDPB Radio tomorrow, where you can hear the complete program in its entirety, beginning at 11 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Mountain. For more information on all of our election coverage, visit our website at sdpb.org/election. On behalf of South Dakota Public Broadcasting, thank you for watching. Good night.
And we'll be live again this